Alors, bonjour à tous et à toutes. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm David Eidelman, Vice Principal Health Affairs and Dean of the Faculty of Medicine and Health Sciences here at McGill. And I want to welcome to those of you who are here in person, and of course, those who are watching on video. I had heard there was going to be a storm. It's very sunny outside, which is nice. We've got a great program lined up for you. It's going to be a very thought-provoking discussion about the future of cancer prevention, diagnosis, and treatment, about how research drives change, and really also about how private investment can really make a difference. So before we meet our special guest, a man who's known as one of Canada's most benevolent business leaders, I would like to begin with a land acknowledgement. McGill University is on land that has long served as a site of meeting and exchange among Indigenous peoples, including the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe nations. We acknowledge and thank the diverse Indigenous peoples whose footsteps have marked this territory on which the peoples of the world now gather. L'Université McGill est située sur un territoire qui a longtemps servi de lieu de rencontre et d'échange entre les peuples autochtones, notamment la Haudenosaunee et Anishinaabe. Nous saluons et remercions les divers peuples autochtones qui ont enrichi de leur présence ce territoire accueillant aujourd'hui des gens de partout dans le monde. It's my great pleasure to introduce Mr. Michael Lee-Chin. You may already know his name. Those of you who've been to Toronto and seen the iconic Michael Lee-Chin crystal at the Royal Ontario Museum will maybe put two and two together. I know I did when I read my notes. I went, oh, that Michael Lee-Chin. He's a great patron of the arts. He's also a tireless champion of education with gifts to his alma mater, McMaster University, the University of Toronto, and he's been a great supporter in his native Jamaica. He holds honorary doctorates from multiple universities, including Wilfrid Laurier University, where he served as chancellor for 5 years. And he and his family have also supported the Joseph Brant Hospital at home in Burlington, Ontario. He came from very humble beginnings. He was born to a teenage, soon-to-be orphaned mother in Port Antonio, Jamaica, and he rose to the top of wealth management industry here in Canada. Now he's the founder and chairman of Portland Holdings, which has a stake in billion-dollar companies around the world. This includes a share in the Canadian mutual fund company, AIC Limited, and a controlling interest in National Commercial Bank Jamaica, the country's second-largest bank. He's a Canadian and a Jamaican, a member of the Order of Ontario and the Order of Jamaica. He's both African Jamaican and Chinese Jamaican in terms of his ancestry on both sides of his family. And he said that he feels a particular responsibility as a member of a family that had survived enslavement when so many did not. Known for his twin philosophies of doing well and doing good, Michael is said to be always on the lookout for opportunities, especially ones that involve an opportunity to solve societal woes. And one area where he sees his opportunity right now is in healthcare innovation, especially as it relates to cancer treatment and the cancer medical industry. Now, before we invite my co-host, world-class researcher, Professor Morag Park, to join us, we're going to continue to get to know Michael a little bit better. He's a man with a fascinating story. He's the only black billionaire in Canada and one of only 15 black billionaires in the world. But he also has a son who lost his mother to cancer last year. Michael, you had the Hyacinth Chen School of Nursing at Northern Caribbean University named for your mother. And you credit her with leading by example and lighting the fire of ambition in you. So I'm interested to hear about that. And I'd like you to tell us a little bit about what you learned from Hyacinth and how it influences you still in your approach to your philanthropic and professional life. And I'm actually going to sit down here instead of standing at that podium.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? So the question is, how did my mom influence me?
Yeah, how did you,
in life, you're fortunate if you choose the right role models. And you're really blessed if your role model was your parent. In this case, my mom, she was an orphan. She had me when she was 18 years old, and she was unemployed. So for the first 6 months of my life, she was taken in by the helpers. We were taken in by the helpers of the local supermarket until she got a job. So she has always led by example. She had high standards and she cared for others. Despite her own situation, she always cared for others. She had high standard of expectations of herself and her children. And as I said, she led by example. She was also entrepreneurial. She had 3 jobs at one stage, and she was a bookkeeper. She was for the Weston family here in Canada. She was a bookkeeper. So what did I gather from my mom? Well, one should always have the highest standard. You can be anybody you want to be if you aspire, if you work hard, you care about people, you uplift others, you're a continuous student, and whatever you do it with your head, your heart, and your hands. So those are some of the lessons I would have learned from my mother.
And I gather she eventually went on to run her own you said she worked for the Westons, but she had her own supermarket chain.
Yes, she was ambitious. She wanted to be, she's a natural entrepreneur. She was very acquisitive. So she eventually started a supermarket with one and eventually grew into the largest supermarket chain in Jamaica. And our favorite pastime would be just to go driving and looking for opportunities.
That is very, very entrepreneurial. When your passion is your entrepreneurship.
Yes.
That's great. But she and your stepfather had enormous challenges. I gather you were 9 children at one point, and there was no money for you to go to university, and yet you did go to university. I mean, how did you pull that off?
Well, after I graduated from high school, I wanted to go to university. We didn't have any money, so I had to get a job. So I got a job on a cruise ship that plied between Miami, the Bahamas, and Jamaica, Norwegian Caribbean Lines, NCL. And my job was, I was a bellhop. So I worked on the ship for 3 months. And then I got a job I left, then I got a job as a lab technician at one of the bauxite companies. So I'd saved $2,000 by September of 1970. So I thought, okay, now I have enough money for 1 year's tuition room and board of engineering school. So I'm going to apply to engineering school, and the first university to send me an acceptance letter, that's when I'm going to go to. McMaster did. So I went to McMaster. So at the end of, so I had only 1 year's worth of tuition room and board. I didn't know where second, third, nor fourth year sustenance was going to come from. So at the end of first year, got a job on campus laying sod, landscaping department. Come July, middle of July, I'd saved $600. I needed $2,000. So there's no way I was going to save in 6 weeks $1,400 because I was working from the end of April. So I got desperate, and I did what every student would do when they're desperate and they have no way out. I wrote to the Prime Minister. And I said, Prime Minister of Jamaica, I noticed that you send, and I hear that you send an emissary of recruits every year to recruit the graduates. But I've been writing to your services commissions, which is the agency that disburses bursaries and scholarships, and no one has responded to me. Prime Minister, you cannot harvest unless you sow. So a month later, we didn't have email then, I got a letter from the Prime Minister's office. When next year in Jamaica, come and see me. So I took $400 of my $600, bought a ticket to Jamaica, a two-way ticket. Went, I didn't meet the Prime Minister then. I met his permanent secretary. And I had reasonable marks. They gave me a scholarship for 3 years.
Wow.
I needed $2,000. The scholarship was for $5,000 per year. So I was able to send back money to my family. So, typical student.
Typical, very typical, not, but very entrepreneurial. I see a theme emerging here. Now, I gather that when you've graduated...
Excuse me, David. One thing of note here is entrepreneurs, they don't necessarily see all green lights before they go. In other words, most people make decisions with the following format: ready, aim, fire. Entrepreneurs, right?
Go ahead and say it.
Ready, fire, aim. In other words, I didn't know where I was going to get my, how I was going to put myself through university for second, third, and fourth year. But I figured I'm going to jump off the precipice without a parachute, and I know somehow I'm going to figure it out. That is the difference, because most people will be tentative. They want to see it clear through to the end. But invariably, you just can't see things clear through to the end. And that is what prevents most of us from jumping.
Well, keeping with that theme, when you graduated, I gather you had some difficulty finding a role. It says here that you sent out like your CV to hundreds of companies. And
so,
it didn't... Maybe tell me about that.
So I was on a scholarship, so I had to go back to Jamaica for 2 years to work in kind to repay my scholarship. So I came back in 1976 to Canada, and I was looking for an engineering job, a civil engineering job. I sent out 100 resumes. I got 100 rejections. Must have been a recession in Canada for engineers, civil engineers at that time. So I had 3 job offers. The first was to become a long-haul truck driver. The second was to become a soap salesman. And the third was to sell mutual funds. I opted for the third, to sell mutual funds. So being 26, I was 26, not looking like the quintessential Canadian financial advisor.
Not at all.
Canada was not as cosmopolitan as it is today. Not sounding like one. But I didn't know anyone with money. So I had to cold call, I had to knock on doors. Mm-hmm. And when someone would say to me, Mike, okay, come and see me at my home. When I got to the house, before knocking on the door, I'd ask myself the question. I felt such a debt of gratitude that someone would really want to invite me into their home to listen to what I have to say. I felt such a debt of gratitude that I asked myself the question, what is the highest value add I can give to this family here tonight? Just in recompense for their graciousness. What can I do that would transform their life? What's the highest value add I can give to them? And the answer was, make them wealthy. Make them wealthy. If I can do that, that would be an apt recompense for their graciousness. So the question I had as a young man was, is there a formula that if you practice consistently, the only outcome is wealth? Because if there's such a formula, I want to know what that formula is.
Sure.
And I'm going to dedicate my life to it and be the role model for it. So that was my quest as a young man, to find that formula.
Well, even as a young man, though, you went a little beyond that. And I read here that at 32, you made another one of those ready, fire, aim moves, where you managed to borrow $500,000, and this must have been at a time when that was a serious money, from what's now the HSBC Bank of Canada to invest in Mackenzie Financial Group. Maybe tell me a little bit about that. That sounds like a really bold move.
Well, if you are without a framework that guides you, it would sound like a risky move. But if you operate within a strict framework that is your absolute religion, then it was the natural thing to do. So fortunately, you see, what the blessings that I have had is that I'm a very analytical person. So I try to distill behavior into frameworks. Because you can't teach behavior. It's difficult to teach behavior. But if you can distill behavior into frameworks, you can teach frameworks. So two frameworks that are relevant here. One big one. If you want to be successful at any endeavor, you want to be the best scientist, you want to be the best prime minister, the best student, this formula will always work. Number one, identify a role model. Who before me has done this endeavor the best in the world? Identify a role model. Number two, kneel at the role model's feet, figuratively, and ask, role model, how did you do it? Please, may I have the recipe? Give me the recipe. And number three, do the same. Don't change the recipe. Right? Role model, recipe, do the same. The second framework that's relevant here is success is a function of, in addition to that, of number one, being guided in every aspect of your life by a relevant framework. Scientists, that's what we do every day. Number two, being able to keep your emotions from corroding your framework. And number three, having access. So, framework, control your emotions, and access. But if you have two out of three, it's not good enough. You have to have all three. Because if you have framework and control your emotions, but no access, there will be no success. But if you don't know that you need framework, control emotions, and access, it's not just going to fall into your lap. So that framework, again, has guided me. So there's a framework for creating wealth. And it goes like this. Everybody who created wealth did 5 things. Number one, they own a few, not too many, high-quality businesses. Number two, few high-quality businesses. Number two, those businesses are domiciled in strong long-term growth industries. Number three, they really understand them. Number four, they use other people's money prudently. And lastly, their attitude towards ownership is I'll hold these businesses for as long as 2 conditions remain intact. Number one, the business remain high quality and the industries within which they are domiciled continues to be in a strong long-term growth mode. So those are the 5 things what I now call the 5 laws of wealth creation that I codified when I was 28 because of that question. How is wealth created? Is there a formula? That's the formula, and I've lived it.
Very, very, very wise words.
So, sorry, David, you asked me about McKinsey.
Yes, I did.
Remember the formula?
I was
framework.
afraid to go back to it.
Go back to, I'm sorry. So it's a framework, control emotions, and so I just define the framework to you. Own a few high-quality businesses that you understand are in strong long-term growth industries, that you use other people's money prudently, and lastly, your intent, you will hold it for as long as they remain great businesses. So armed with that framework, I said to myself, what business would best fit that framework? Oh, the business and industry that I'm in. Because this was 1983. I'm in an industry which was the asset management business that has huge runway ahead of it, driven by the baby boomers. The baby boomers, I'm a typical baby boomer, I was 32 at the time, and coming at 32, what do families do at 32? Well, they're in a process of consuming. They're buying a home, car, refrigerator, etc. So we had the largest percentage of the North American population then, 30% of the North American population engaged in one activity, consumption. But you don't create wealth by doing what people are doing today. You create wealth by doing what people will be doing in the future. So at 32, in 1983, I thought, okay, my cohorts, the baby boomers, are consuming. What will we be doing 10 years from now? Well, 10 years from now, when I'm 42, we're all going to wake up one day, 30% of the North American population, and say, wow, we've been consuming all this time. I have 23 more years to retire. I don't have enough money to retire. So coming is a huge saving and investing boom. So how do you participate today in that coming boom? Well, you can buy shares in a bank. But if you bought shares in a bank, you'll also suffer from loan losses. So it's not the bullseye. You can buy shares in an insurance company. Well, you could also suffer from underwriting losses. Or you could buy shares in an asset management business. Bingo, bullseye. So that's the...
And then came the greatest bull market in history.
And then exactly. So 1980. So that is what propelled me was the framework that guided my thinking to McKinsey Financial. I understood it. It was a high quality business, one which I understood, strong long-term growth industry. It's a function of using other people's money. It's an asset management business. It's not on balance sheet. It's right. And all I have to do is simply hold it. This was 1983. The total assets in retrospect now in the asset management industry managed by the total mutual funds assets in 83 were 5 billion across Canada. Today, 2 trillion. So 400 times.
Okay, I missed that one.
No, but in summary, let's summarize. What I try to do again is distill behavior into framework so we can teach and learn and replicate, right? In summary, we have codified that behavior into what we call the 3 Ps. You want to create wealth? Number 1, the first P is to predict. Take a view of the world. Predict. Number 2P is to plan for your prediction. And number 3P is to persevere with your plan. So in this case, in 1983, I predicted that because of the tailwind driven by the baby boomers, there was going to be demand for more asset management services. That was my prediction. So I planned, I went out as a young man, borrowed $500,000 to put into one stock, McKinsey Financial Corporation. And I persevered. It just didn't go up like that. It went, right?
But one day it started. You got that inflection point. Now, I also understand you're very interested in clean energy, which sounds like another one of those 3P type situations. And I wonder if you want to say something about that and say, your hopes for that industry, where you see nuclear. I know we were talking about nuclear, peaceful nuclear energy use in the green room before.
So in keeping with PPP, predict, this is a very... typically, when someone mentions the word predict, the bells go off immediately. That must be speculation. Predict, you must be speculating. Well, the key is to be able to connect dots, extrapolate, whereby you minimize the speculative aspect of it. So, the prediction here is there is an existential threat that mankind is facing. And if we don't solve for that, the carbonization, our great-grandchildren will not survive. That's the prediction. There's an existential threat because of our consumption behavior, right? Which has been building for 200 years. So, the prediction is, okay, so we talk about renewables, sun, wind, hydro, etc. But renewables are not enough. Renewables do not provide base load to replace fossil fuels, which is high density energy. The only solution that mankind has to supplant base load is nuclear, period. So whether we like it or not, that's the only solution. because nuclear has zero carbon footprint. And so that's our only solution. So therefore, the prediction is there'll be a lot more nuclear coming along. But it won't be in the form, the nuclear energy will not be in the form generated by these big, huge monolith giga plants. Because those take 20 years to build, and invariably have cost overruns and time overrun. It will come in the form of SMRs, small modular reactors, which are built in factories, so 85% of the cost can be controlled because they're factory built. No different from an automobile or airplanes. So SMRs will be the way of the future. What we are now doing is making sure that, because we see SMRs, small modular reactors, as being the only replacement for baseload, is making sure that we invest in that area, and also what is upstream of that, of SMRs, and downstream of SMRs.
Okay, I'm going to be calling my financial advisor after this meeting. No. Thank you very much. I really like your approach. I think that the approach has a lot in common with my co-host I'm about to introduce, who, as a scientist, a very successful scientist, also had to do the 3 Ps, although in a different domain. So Morag Park, as I mentioned earlier, is the director of the Rosalind and Morris Goodman Cancer Institute at McGill. I'm going to ask her to come up. She's the Diane and Sal Guerrero Chair in Cancer Genetics, and she's a distinguished James McGill Professor in the Gerald Bronfman Department of Oncology, the Department of Biochemistry, and the Department of Medicine. She's internationally recognized for her contributions to cancer research, from molecular to complex. She's innovative, forward-thinking. She's really pioneered our understanding of various mechanisms of oncogenesis, which is how cancer develops. She's identified cancer-causing genes that have gone on to be parts of important diagnostics and some of the first precision oncology therapeutic targets in the clinic. And she's particularly well known for her research on breast cancer, which has helped us to understand what types of changes in breast tumors could be most harmful for patients, and why it's important not just to study tumors, but also the environment in which they grow and their response to the immune system, really helping to change the way researchers study cancer. She's cloned genes that have gone on to be really therapeutic targets, identified molecular pathways critical for invasive growth of tumors, and she's paved the way for methods that are needed to take samples from cancer patients, especially patients with highly lethal cancers, and make them come up with better ways of monitoring them and hopefully more suitable treatments. She's a key thought leader in her field. For example, she was recently invited by Cancer Research UK, which is a major think tank, to set down the key challenges in cancer research for the next generation. She's a chevalière, or a knight, of the Ordre National du Québec, and a recipient of the Prix du Québec, which is our province's highest distinction to recognize career achievements in culture or science. So, Morag, always a pleasure to have you here. Welcome. I wonder if you could start by just telling us a little bit about the Rosalind and Morris Cancer Institute.
I'm happy to do that. I could start by saying I missed all the investment opportunities that you talked about, but maybe I've got stuff to learn yet, in my retirement. The Rosalind Morris Goodman Cancer Institute, so the GCI, we call it the GCI, is a world-class cancer research institute at McGill University. It's home to cutting-edge technology platforms, over 300 researchers as well as students. And we build on our legacy, our history that we're very proud about, our history of discoveries. So scientists at the GCI are world leaders in their field. They're recognized through their discoveries and their ideas to actually shape the fields that they're in. And this is important because it's this legacy that allows us to recruit the next world-class leaders in cancer research from across the world, but also to train the next generation of students in cancer research, and they will become the next cancer leaders that we need. This legacy is based on a history of discovery, of curiosity-driven research, unintended discoveries, but recognizing the importance. And this started by Phil Gold over 45 years ago, discovering CEA, carcinal embryonic antigen. It's a biomarker that's still used today to detect cancer, and more importantly, your response to different therapies. We also have a legacy of Nahum Sonnenberg. Over the last 30 years of his research in messenger RNA has contributed really to the blueprint to build the messenger RNA vaccines that were used for COVID. But this is the blueprint for the next messenger RNA vaccines against cancer, for example. And these, our discoveries by a number of members were really identified some of the first precision oncology targets. And these are the targets that went on to treat patients in precision oncology. I think what's important to also highlight is our vision of collaboration. We recognize that it's important to build collaborative teams between researchers, clinicians, but also thinking outside the box with bioinformaticians, mathematicians, and also engineers. And really by working together.
Not entrepreneurs?
And entrepreneurs.
Okay.
But I hadn't met you then. That's the problem. But they are entrepreneurs. Particularly in the biomedical engineers, are really driving new technology and new ideas. And it's through building these multidisciplinary teams that we're taking on some of the biggest challenges. Why cancers don't respond to treatment and why they progress to metastatic disease and we can't treat them. We have to work out the why.
Thank you, Morag. Now, I've heard that you said, Michael, that healthcare is in the early innings of a boom, and I guess that cancer, oncology, is the boom within a boom. I wonder if you could elaborate on that.
Well, as mentioned earlier, I'm guided by, I was guided and still am guided by demographics. Remember I mentioned earlier, when I was 32, what was current at 30, what are the largest percentage of the North American population, the baby boomers, doing at 32, etc. Today I'm 72. And at 72, what do 72-year-old people think about? My gosh, I want to live long, and I want to live I want to have a high quality of life. Now, so healthcare, so we have the baby boomers all thinking this way, right? We're all thinking the same way, right? So now, we are therefore in the early innings of a healthcare boom and an oncology boom, because within the context of healthcare, there's the baby boomer. The older you become, the more likely you are to get cancer.
Right.
Therefore, there's a boom, there's a healthcare boom, but within that, there's a cancer boom. That is happening right now. So that is what I refer to as a boom within a boom, driven by demographics. So that presents an opportunity for us to solve one of mankind's most difficult, challenging issue. That's the approach.
Demographics as destiny, so to speak.
Basically.
Now, Morag, before we go too far, maybe you could just really define what you mean by precision oncology, and what are the gaps that have to be met to really make that a reality?
Well, in cancer, precision oncology is based on studying the cancer, that patient's cancer. And this is based usually on biomarkers or genomic changes in the cancer that lead to both the diagnosis, but also the design and decision making in the treatment that you would treat that patient with. So you're really treating the patient's cancer, targeting the changes that have occurred in that cancer. The challenges you asked is that not all cancers have targets that are suitable for precision oncology. And some cancers, you even treat them that are thought to respond, and they don't. And it's coming back to something you just said, that we're all getting older. So we don't die as young as we did. So cancers now are of course inevitable. And cancers in older people have not been studied as much as cancers were before. We have to recognize that we change as we get old. Our metabolism changes, but also our immune system changes. And we now recognize the influence of these changes, allowing cancer to develop as we're probably all walking around with early stages of cancer, including you and I'm sorry to tell you. But we're doing a good job at keeping them at bay. And so this is, we have to start thinking beyond just targeting the cancer, about our whole holistic way of life. And I think you alluded to that.
So in that context, what kind of companies should we be looking at to be investing in?
Well, what Morag just mentioned is referred to as theranostics, being able to diagnose and treat. And this is an area of precision oncology that is, the metaphor would be, if we can see it, we can treat it. Because if you can see it, it means that the receptor is there, right? Which shows up on a PET scan with gallium-68 in this case. And we can now treat it with a therapeutic isotope, in this case, lutetium or some alpha emitter, whether it's lead-212 or actinium-225, which are to come. So this whole platform of, if we can see it, we can treat it, or theranostics, is a very robust platform, because which is constrained by us being able to target the cells. That's a constraint. Once we can target the cells, we know we can zap them. So it's a very robust platform, constrained by the targeted molecules, but more and more, because of the robustness of the platform, more and more companies are getting involved and finding better targeted molecules. So that it's a whole, it's an area of investing that would be relatively nascent, and therefore they are very, and because this space is now hot, you have a lot of companies that are getting into the field. They're really not getting into it to solve for cancer. They're getting into it to make money. And I'll use pejoratively the term Wall Street type people, getting into it, putting together a company to make money. That's a danger. So we make sure we find companies that are in the business, that are really technology companies, that are there using their technology, their know-how to solve for cancer. That's their reason for being. They're true engineering company or technology companies. So you have to bifurcate, distinguish between the companies that are there, that are driven by the passion to solve for problems, versus companies that are cobbled together to make money.
So in that context, we're looking for real companies that are really doing it. What are the researchers at the Goodman Cancer Institute doing to fill the gaps in precision oncology?
Yes.
And obviously create the new knowledge that is going to be the basis for these companies.
So what you're talking about, as you said, are those cancers where there are receptors, so there are targets that you can now couple with a theranostic. The biggest challenge that we see are those cancers that are still not targetable. And what we recognize now, as I mentioned earlier, is that our immune system actually fights cancers. They're probably fighting it as we're sitting here at the moment. But, and this is how we've seen this big boom in immunotherapies. These are therapeutics that stimulate your immune system to enhance their ability to target the cancer. But this is usually coupled with a standard of care or precision oncology. But still, some patients don't respond to these immunotherapies. So we've taken that challenge, and we've got some members from the Goodman, Logan Walsh and Peter Siegel, and their students, who are sitting at the back there. They've just, using new technology, they've mapped the atlas of the immune landscape in a number of the most difficult to target cancers. Brain cancer, brain metastasis, but also lung cancer. What type of brain cancer? So these are glioblastomas.
Glioblastoma.
For the most part, but also brain metastasis. So this is the biggest challenge in cancer. Once you develop metastasis, how do you treat it?
Yeah.
But knowing that our immune system can attack and can, be used to enhance our ability to attack cancer, we have to understand why you don't respond to, why our immune system isn't responding. And so what Logan and Peter just published a couple of weeks ago, 2 big papers in Nature, making the first atlas worldwide, understanding the immune landscape. But what this has shown us is that they can now predict who's going to respond and who isn't. Now, this is a very complex technology, but they can distill this, obviously with entrepreneurs and a business, maybe that Logan will start, to small numbers of markers that can be used to start to predict that these cancers would respond to therapy, but those wouldn't. And maybe we shouldn't treat these people in the same way. The other area that is really evolving, and I think that this becomes important talking about our lifestyle, is the recognition that cancers have a metabolic dependency, particularly very aggressive cancers and metastatic cancers. So they have a dependency for different metabolites. So you talked about PET scans. So these are radioactive glucose that some cancers will take up more than normal cells. And we use this as a diagnostic to find these cancers. But what we know now as cancers progress and that they become refractory to treatment is they change their dependency. They don't need glucose anymore. They use other types of metabolites. So we talked about using different radioisotopes earlier, and we now can use different radioactive metabolites. And we do this at the GCI, but we use mice, and we follow these cancers with the different radioactive metabolites. Now, where this is really important today is that we recognize now in our populations, we're becoming obese. And this is 30% of the Canadian population, maybe 50% of the American population. And that this change in our metabolic state influences cancer development. And so this metabolic transition is now recognized to be as high a risk as smoking in both causing or at least promoting cancer progression. So understanding this becomes a really key, important research question. But also this influences how we think about diet. And what becomes really interesting is that these different metabolic states, you respond differently to different therapies. You respond differently to immunotherapy, you respond differently to chemotherapy. So we have to understand the metabolic state that promotes the best response to different therapies for cancer. But also we really have to work on how to understand what these transitions are. Why does our change in metabolic health promote cancers? And we know that this has a lot to do with inflammation and our immune health, that our metabolic health influences our immune health. And they're both changing as we get older. Mm-hmm. So we need to know.
So Morag talked a lot about how to promote our health, but we also want to look at it from a business point of view. And I know you said one of your principles is to really understand the businesses you invest in. And I've read that about Warren Buffett and other billionaires who have been very successful. If we're talking about building wealth now, especially in the healthcare sector, what should investors be looking at in terms of really are the key things that they need to understand about these businesses?
Well, firstly, the going back to generic framework. Firstly, 5 laws, generic framework. You have to understand the industry within which you're operating. Make sure that you have there's a strong long-term tailwind in your back. Number two, you have to understand the business, right? The business itself. And as I said, you want to make sure that you are buying businesses whereby there is the passion is to solve human unmet problems in this case, versus businesses that are cobbled together just to take advantage of the fact that the space is hot. Personally, not being a scientist in this space and going back to, I can't understand too many things. So I focus. And in this case, I have selected theranostics, precision oncology, TRT, targeted radionuclide therapy, as the area of cancer that we will focus on. So it's a relatively narrow field, but it's one that I have access to a lot of understanding. So I don't go outside of that circle of that circumference. Mm-hmm. I try to push the radius, make it a little larger by understanding more, but right now I'm not about to step over the circumference.
Makes a lot of sense. Now, Morag, we're talking about precision oncology, talking about investment. Why is now a good time to invest in precision oncology particularly?
Well, I think you talked about theranostics. These are based on our discoveries over the last 20 years of the targets. And precision oncology, as we know, is targeting the known targets in cancer, often with small molecule inhibitors, if these are enzymes that have an activity, but also with theranostics, as you just said. So the last 20 years that have discovered what we now call precision oncology, the targets, this is the low-hanging fruit, basically, of research. But we now have new technologies that can begin to expand this discovery space. We have built precision oncology pipelines of different cancers that we study at the Goodman, understanding why these cancers don't respond. And of course, the goal there is to find out what's the next target, what's the next precision oncology target, or the next theranostic target for these cancers. So it's based on really revolutionary technologies, also applying AI and deep learning to big data. So we now work nationally to bring cohorts of different cancers together, patients that are not responding to therapy, for example, and we bring these cohorts together and generate big data. So we get the genomic data, we can get the immune health data, as well as the metabolic data in these cancers. And by integrating this, we can start to identify the next new targets. But it's also true for rare cancers. Rare cancers haven't really been studied because it's a challenge. So now we work worldwide.
And also because they're rare,
but
there's no money.
There's no money, there's no advocates, and there's no money.
Exactly,
You're
no money to be made
right.
because they're so rare.
Yeah, but we've taken on that challenge. So we work now worldwide, and I'll give an example, rare ovarian cancers that in young women who die of these cancers. So now these cancers are flown to us, believe it or not, at the Goodman, and we grow them, we implant them in mice, and we can now study these cancers for the first time. And we can ask the question, what causes them? And how can we treat them? And so we use high throughput technologies. We've made some discoveries. There are now some clinical trials that are being built worldwide to ask these questions. So I think now we can do it. We can take on the biggest challenges. And I think the next generation of researchers recognize the importance of working together globally. We have joint funding with research groups in Europe, across the world, and we no longer, restrict ourselves to our small little environment. But we have to think big, and we have to be prepared to work with others.
Just an addendum to what Morag said. I just want to bifurcate for clarity that when you say investing in this space, we can invest in research, early research. But to advance the research, but that is very speculative. Or we can invest in areas that are more commercially visible. So if as an investor, you want to make sure you bifurcate, that you know exactly what you're doing. This money that I'm about to put in, it's for research, to advance knowledge. I don't expect any return from it. It's an advancement of knowledge. This pool of capital, I expect a return from it, and it's more commercial. So I just wanted to bifurcate that to you so that it's clear. Because this whole field, as we know, cancer research has gobbled up hundreds of billions. And there's been no commercial, very little commercial return from those hundreds of billions. So we have to be quite clear and look for those companies that are commercial. They have a pipeline of opportunities that are in the FDA pipeline, right? Whether in stage 1, 2, 3, or they're already beyond that. So we just have to be careful.
So in that regard, what would you tell your fellow investors, business people, about the future of healthcare and what role they should play in this field?
Well, two answers. Number one, wearing my philanthropic cap, I certainly would invest in research. That's philanthropy. Wearing my commercial cap, I am going to make sure that those entities I invest in, I can see commercial viability. I can see they're not too early stage. I can see a path to FDA approval, and I can see commerciability. So just to distinguish being a philanthropist and being a commercial person.
But you need to do both.
We need to do both. But firstly, you need to be a commercial person first to be a philanthropist. You have to make money first before you can donate it.
Well said, and very true. Okay, well, I think that's going to take us to the end of our conversation with Michael Lichin. I have to say, I had the opportunity to hear you a little bit before we sat down. It's been really a great pleasure, a real privilege to hear your thoughts. Very, very down to earth, practical. I like your frameworks, and I think that our scientist colleagues will recognize the same frameworks, just used slightly differently. So I'd like to thank you all for being with us, whether you joined us in person or virtually, que vous soyez avec nous en personne ou virtuellement. Merci d'avoir été des nôtres. We'd like to especially thank you, Michael, for making this trip here today. I know your family is here, so thank you for coming. It's really great. Thank you for being so generous with your time and your insights. And there's no question that with change agents like Michael Lichin, who believe really in the transformative power of clear thinking and of science, we really can make a change in the way the world works and make the world a better place. You're all very welcome, those who are here, to stay behind for a little cocktail we're going to be having. And we just ask that you remain seated so that the speakers can avoid the crowds and get down. I want to wish you all a great afternoon. Bon après-midi à tous et bonne journée.
Excuse me.
Yep.
Someone has a question.
Oh.
First of all, thank you for sharing your inspiring journey with us today. And I wanted to ask if you had any thoughts how we can improve collaboration between academia and the private sector.
The question is, how can we better improve collaboration between academia and the private sector? Well, firstly, having conferences, having sessions like this, because I'm now thinking, what can I do with GCI? What can I do with GCI just to see where there may be, as an entrepreneur, where there may be some entrepreneurial opportunities. And hence the reason why when Morag was saying we are having a confluence of all of these different areas, I said entrepreneurialism also necessary.
You can be an entrepreneur in residence.
So we need to build deeper collaboration with entrepreneurs, because they're the ones who will take the risk. They're the ones who will advocate commercially.
So I'm going to say thank you. We would have liked to have a question and answer period. Unfortunately, Michael needs to go, so we're going to have to cut it short. I really apologize. I'm sure you have tons of questions.
There's a storm coming in
in
Ontario.
He wants
so
to get back to Ontario before it's too
storm.
late. Thank you very, very much. That was wonderful.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's great.